All right. We are live. Welcome, everybody, to the weekly live stream of the We Are J6 Strategic Alliance. Thank you so much for everyone that is here. And of course, we're just getting started out of the gate here at 12 noon, and attendance and participation will be growing quickly over the next couple of moments. But just to kick us off, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. We've made it a practice to open this weekly meeting in prayer, and so I want to stick to that. I think it's a good habit. So I'm going to start there. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for the fact that we live in a free country that is founded on the great principles that come from your word, and from men and women over the ages that have acknowledged you as God and acknowledged you as good, and know that our inalienable human rights come from you, and therefore they're pre-political and governments cannot take them away. So we're just grateful for that truth, that reality, and that foundation that really undergirds what we believe and everything that we are committed to with this group. And Father God, we ask for your mercy, your grace, your wisdom, your providence to continue helping the healing process for so many former defendants, now J6 patriots, and their families who have been powerfully and negatively affected by the J6 event and the J6 prosecutions. So we ask for your healing on all of those people, and also your wisdom and blessing to renew our hearts and our minds in our own lives, and also as a community and as a nation, as we work towards this idea of restorative justice. And we just ask your blessing and thank you for all that are participating. And in God's name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amazing. So you guys, thanks again for being here. We have Will Pope and Lieutenant Colonel Larry Brock joining us this week. Before we get some input from them, I just want to kind of summarize where we are as a group. Again, We Are J6. This is a free speech association. It's really not any more specific or formal than that, so to speak. It's a community. It's a grassroots effort. It's centered around, of course, actual J6 former defendants, which I like to now call J6 patriots, as we are exonerated, as we should be. And that's, of course, very exciting. But we were formerly defendants and targets of a weaponized Department of Justice, of course, as we know. But even though most of the people throughout the country have gotten some sort of a sense of the fact that that's happened or what it is, most people don't really understand, of course, the full extent of what happened, why it happened, and the consequences involved. So this group is centered around those former defendants, but also inviting the general public, as we like to call advocates, to support restorative justice for J6ers. And of course, a huge part of that process is to help the nation understand who we are, where we're coming from, what actually happened to us, what we have gone through, the downstream effects. And there's a lot more work to be done and a lot more support and advocacy that we need to pursue in order to achieve those things. And that's what this group is for, among other things that we'll dig into. So Dr. Gold, if you could give us kind of an update as far as where we are at related to the last few weeks. We've been doing the live stream every Saturday at 12 noon Eastern, almost a month and a half or so, which is great. We want to see that continue, growing the group, growing support and solidarity, and continuing to advance the mission of helping to share the stories and educate the public about what's going on as we pursue our objectives.
Yeah, thank you so much. First, I want to apologize because we were not able to do the meeting last week, and I know some of you were on and waiting, and I actually think it was great that people were chatting. So we just want to extend our apologies. And just to put everyone on the same footing, we started this predominantly for what John said, which is to make sure that Americans understand what happened that day. And to do that, they have to see human beings, their neighbors, that this happened to. Otherwise, people don't really quite believe it. So that's probably the number one purpose. Pretty close, number two, is to band together towards restorative justice, a kind of a restitution, which would have to include financial compensation for people who've endured massive financial harm and non-financial harm. So they're both there. We have less control over how that second option will look, because that will come down to essentially, I believe, lawyers negotiating on J6ers' behalves with the administration. So we actually talk about that less because we have less control over that. What we actually have much more control over is getting the narrative out about people. Somebody asked a question like why we made this public a few weeks ago, and it's specifically because people need to hear from us. It needs to be normalized in the sense that all of us, when we went through this, were shamed even by people who support us, even by family members, even people that knew we were not violent and not dangerous. All of us endured a lot of shaming. And so the American people this needs to kind of be out front. I also have to say, obviously, nobody on this group can answer direct legal questions. You all know I'm a lawyer. Some of the things, somebody posted a question, just because I just feel obligated. There's no way to answer a person's particular legal question. So one question is, how about a Philadelphia DA about threatening new state charges? My instinct as just a human American citizen watching what's going on is not to overreact and not to be overly concerned, because there's a president in charge who's really not going to put up with that. And he has gone after people. You saw that he just, they made a deal essentially with New York Mayor Adams, so the president has a huge amount of power at this point. And I just don't think local prosecutors and local DAs are necessarily so excited about poking the bear. I think that they're interested in scaring you and saying big things. My instinct wouldn't be to be overly worried about that, but I can't give legal advice. Just saying, is there a possibility of somebody filing a state charge? I can tell you, having looked into us bringing, kind of a restitution kind of claim, it's pretty difficult to go out of the jurisdiction of District of Columbia. It's not impossible, probably, but it's kind of hard. So I just wouldn't overreact to the fear portion of that. I'm just going to say, just short, where we are legally on this. We are not in any definite legal position. I want to reassure people that I think that's kind of a good thing, because we've talked to, when I say we, I mostly mean it's mostly been John and myself. Derek's busy with 4 kids. He's still 100,000% in. So is Brandon, who's on the West Coast today. So we're all still together. But it's been challenging to find a group of lawyers, because it's not going to be a single, who understand the lay of the land the way we do, which is this twin goal of making sure the American people understand what happened and the financial, and that we're talking to a friendly admin. Like, we talk to lawyers like, oh, we want to bring a big lawsuit and make, but like, we're not really interested in going to war against the Trump administration. We're interested in having a good, friendly conversation. So we've taken tentative steps in that direction. And the main thing we can do is put our stories out there, because no matter which lawyers end up picking us up or we end up picking them up, a strong narrative. I mean, I've had about 5 conversations this week with different lawyers. They want that narrative. They want that, front and center people's stories. So that's what we have to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, related to lawsuits or civil actions of any kind, as well as potential congressional actions and various other ways that we as J6ers and just the country in general, there's many different avenues that people may take to address various concerns and various consequences from what happened here, right? It's a big conversation. There's a lot involved, but all of it requires significant political willpower and buy-in from the American public, because this is a democratic form of a constitutional republic. So demos, the voice of the people, matters in these things. So that's an important aspect of what we're doing related to any various ideas that we have. Dr. Gold, I do have a specific question for you. I know you can't give legal advice. However, a question someone has emailed to us, which I think a lot of people might have this question, and you could sort of answer it directly to me because I was in the exact same position. So I don't mind you giving me advice, because you are actually one of my lawyers. But the question was, the DOJ, in many cases, after, of course, President Trump took it over and set it back on the proper direction, the DOJ began to vacate a lot of charges or cases against J6ers that were ongoing or active at any stage, including mine. I had pled not guilty and appealed and had a live appeal. We defeated the felony in 24, and then there were various other pending issues or actions up at the beginning of this year. So now that the DOJ has filed motions to vacate, some people are asking, should I oppose that motion because I want to press my appeal and get an appellate ruling? Should I oppose that motion because if I don't oppose it and they vacate the charges, would that prevent me from pursuing legal recourse in terms of my persecution and wrongful imprisonment and et cetera, et cetera? And my understanding is, no, you should not oppose that because it does, first of all, nothing precludes you from pursuing additional actions based on harms and civil rights violations. Even if you took a plea deal, my lawyers have told me that you can still make claims for civil rights violations. But also, it seems that it's the ultimate victory that you can obtain to have been wrongfully charged for something, and then later for the DOJ to say, oops, we never should have done that, so we're going to vacate the charges or vacate the convictions. In other words, rewind them as if they'd not happened. I know in my case, that is what I did. I did not oppose that motion. I accepted it because it's really kind of the goal I always wanted with my appeal, but it was rewinding to before I even needed to appeal, essentially. Is that a correct summary?
Yeah. Actually, you've summed it up really well. And I don't mean to be cagey when I say I don't want to answer. Just we live in such a litigious world. I don't want people to say I said something legally, but I can definitely share my opinion. If you had a lot of questions in there, I don't think there's really such a thing as like rejecting a pardon. I don't know if you guys saw at the same time, about a week before we all got pardoned, Biden had pardoned a bunch of people. A couple of them were murderers on death row. And a couple of them, or at least one, said he didn't want the pardon. He wanted to take his appeal. He felt he was innocent. But I don't really think there's a way to turn that down. And I don't even see the point of it because you're just picking a fight for no reason. It doesn't make sense to me because you still have all your legal rights to pursue, which we're all going to do here. The vast majority of us, by the way, took pleas. You were an exception, John. I would just let the pardon thing go. Like, I know it galls you. I took a plea. I was innocent, just like, most of us, all of us. And I'm galled by the fact that I took a plea. But a pardon is like an annulment as opposed to a divorce. A pardon really is supposed to go back to the beginning and say that this thing didn't happen.
Well,
so I would just
the president issued his pardon. No one can take that away. But the DOJ, as a separate matter, then has made the decision in my case and in the case of the other person that asked, and I think probably several others, the DOJ made the decision to vacate the existing convictions pending appeal or vacate whatever the current status of each individual situation was. And so I don't think it would make sense to oppose that. That is what we would want the DOJ to do. That's appropriate, correct behavior. Right.
Yes. So thank you for getting me back on track because I think I got a little off track. So your question is if the DOJ vacated, if you should just reject that. First of all, I don't think
they file a motion to vacate, which of course the court would then presumably would grant, but there's no reason for the defendant.
Do not waste your time, energy, efforts on that. It's just chasing a fool's errand or whatever that expression is. It's just not where we have a lot to do. That isn't one of the things. Just be grateful for that. John is about as a fierce fighter as you can find, and he was still delighted to see that the government had vacated. It's a total victory. I mean,
it's an acknowledgement that they were wrong and never.
The government says that. So just let that one go and concentrate. In my opinion, my advice is on two things: is thinking of how to tell the story so you have empathy from the American people that don't understand this, people that are against it, people that think you're an insurrectionist and a violent person. What is a story you can tell? Like in 5 minutes, pick one aspect in your mind and we'll talk about it, but like that you can tell. Like that's really your mission. And the secondary mission is, I don't know if this is a good time, John, we spent a couple of weeks putting together a form that we're going to email out. We tried to get out today, we couldn't, but it's to put in all the particulars, like, the location where you were arrested by the FBI, the judge's name, the prosecutor's name. It's to compile all the data. I am going to take up, I forget the fellow's name who has this background in AI, so we can put this together easily. and to put down all the harm. So this is where your energy should be. It's on being able to tell your story in a way that brings out empathy from your neighbors and your fellow citizens, and filling out this form, which will definitely go out in the next few days, describing the harms that you've been through.
Yeah, the harms are quite extensive, of course, as we know. So it took some work. It's still taking some work to put together that form in a way that's comprehensive, that hopefully captures the broad majority of everything that we want to include, and so that it's organized, but we will be getting that out to the group. I know we have previously sent an email to the group requesting that you submit video for persecution testimonials. And we've received a few submissions, but not many. So we'll continue to send that email out with the link. And please just look for that and encourage others to do the same, because we want to build up the library of those stories.
I just want to put out, because I am just like scanning the chats. All I can say for a couple people is bear with us. We are you, you are us. Like we literally, I have 2 full-time jobs, just, so does John. So we're really going as fast as we can. In addition to the jobs, doing this, the form is good. It is comprehensive, but we needed to write it in such a way that when we collect the data, we're not like, that it's able to be done in a computer form. So it is just about ready. We tried to get it out for this morning. We couldn't. And Chad, I will reach out to you because I could use your help. I'm trying to think. That's it. I don't know if we want to. I guess we don't need to review the form. People will see it in their email when they. Yeah, it's going to take about 30 minutes to put together the form. Just be ready. Like, we're doing that in preparation for a lawyer who hopefully picks up this case, either as a class action or a small group or a large group. But that's why we ask some of the demographic questions, like, just follow it exactly. We've really thought out how we've laid it out.
Will, I want to thank you for joining us today. And would you mind just kind of sharing with everybody a little bit about yourself and what your perspective is on where we currently sit in this process of restorative justice? And I mean, of course, any other comments that you have about the whole idea.
Yeah, pleasure to join you, John. And Dr. Gold, good to see you again. Got to meet you at Bedminster last year. Yeah, I represented myself in my case. I fought the government for 4 years, and we're all happy to be at the finish line, kind of. I'm still tangling with the government on a couple issues right now. But yeah, I think your mention of telling the story is important. And I think, I know we're trying to coordinate on that, but people shouldn't be overly reliant on one entity or group doing that. Like, how I view this is, we've got about 1,600 defendants, and 5 or 10 years from now, hopefully just about all of you will be very respected in your communities, and you'll be influential in society, and we can continue to make an impact on the world, right? So the storytelling isn't going to end with any, civil action you take or anything like that. Like, we need to view this long term. Like, this is going to affect you for the rest of your life. And one thing that I've done recently, like, I'm trying to get my case filed. So I filed a motion on that after my charges were dismissed. And then kind of a rogue January 6th prosecutor filed an opposition to that and basically accused me of everything that they were accusing me before it was dismissed, which you can't really do that. You can't bring allegations after they've been retracted. So I'm fighting that one right now. And I think one that we need to think about, like, John, the government has vacated your charges. So if you've been pardoned, technically your charges are still on the book, right? But they've been forgiven by the president. But if they've been vacated, it's as if you were never convicted at all. You have no criminal record for that. So yes, if you have the opportunity to get your case vacated, go for that. But then when you are vacated, you also have the total presumption of innocence. It's as if you were never convicted at all. So if people bring accusations against you, you need to push back on that. Like, especially if it's a government entity, because they are violating their Fifth Amendment right to the presumption of innocence. So, yeah, I filed a pretty fiery response. Actually, I moved for sanctions on that prosecutor. I don't know how that'll go, but I had to push back and say, hey, you can't just violate my rights on that. And Like, we all need to do that. If people hit us, we need to punch them back as far as the presumption of innocence, because we're going to be in the battle for a little bit. We got the charges gone, but we still need to get the message out to everybody in America that what they did was not acceptable, and that we need to change that narrative, right? So yeah, and again, like Dr. Gold and John are working on kind of a collaborative effort, and I joined you guys for the first one a few weeks ago, but we also need to do this individually. So don't just rely on a collaborative effort. And as far as the legal goes, I'm not an expert on the civil thing. In a way, like strategically, it may be better for you to bring individual action. I mean, just think about your different options, but like, you have options, and I'm not going to make a recommendation one way or the other, but yeah, like, we all need to be acting to move the needle.
Could I just want to jump in on that 100%. First of all, we are not making a group decision for anybody. We're not authorized to do that. It would be immoral to do that. And at the end of the day, everybody should do what's best for them. It is my opinion right now, today, February 2025, that if many people join, we will have much more impact in a positive way for all of us. I think there's no question about that. But
Yeah.
at any moment, you may decide this is something you want to do on your own. Like, at some point, I think we're going to present to you, oh, we found these lawyers, they get it, they're on our side, they totally understand it, they want to go negotiate with the administration, and do you want to be part of that? That's kind of where I expect to come back to you and say, and then you're free to say yes or no, and you're still
not
free
necessarily mutually exclusive either.
yeah, and you're free to
various
pick your own. The range of possibilities includes doing nothing, right? A conversation that you have with yourself, you find a lawyer, or yourself, I don't know. You talk to somebody who wants to make a deal with you. I suppose that could happen. A small group who wants to make a deal, a large group who wants to make a deal, or a group or an individual who wants to bring a lawsuit. I mean, any of those things are possible. So I don't know yet if a class action is possible or not possible. I don't know yet if the government would set aside, a substantial legal fund to just, compensate people who, without even putting up a lawsuit. It is literally unknown right now, but you are empowered over your personal situation. And we just promise to keep you absolutely informed of conversations that we have with people. And and when the time comes, I expect to invite as many people who want to join us as possible.
And Will, I loved what you said, just from the standpoint of understanding our individual responsibility and our citizen obligation to know what our rights are, exercise them, defend them, right? So just that perspective, I think, super important. And you're right, each one of us has to do what we need to do for ourselves as individuals, just in terms of continuing to push back on improper actions by the government, pushing back on improper actions by the media and the general public as it relates to your presumption of innocence, your actual innocence, your basic American civil rights, and your standing in the community. That's a big one, right? The obviously the physical and financial devastation we've all experienced, and many people have lost homes, jobs, are struggling to literally survive. And that's something we're very sensitive to and want to address. But then there's also the general reputational damage, both now and really long-standing, that's going to affect all of us really forever, like you said, Will. And that was another good comment that you made. This is going to change our lives forever. And it certainly is, but it seems very negative right now. And there's a huge opportunity for us to turn this into a positive going forward. I know that was your heart, Will, and that's ours too. So that's part of what we want to continue to discuss together, encourage each other, and the encouragement. And as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron, and in a multitude of counselors, there's victory. So we're just looking to kind of spur each other on with ideas and encouragements as we go through these, difficult processes and efforts. So those were all really great things. And as it relates to the legalities and potential civil actions, we're definitely excited about what's going on and what we're hearing in various channels and various areas. Still brainstorming and discussing that. But like Dr. Gold mentioned, it's definitely going to be much more successful the larger and stronger that we build the consensus of the group here, both with J6ers directly and the general public being advocates for this cause. Go ahead.
May I just add, I just want to add that this is an opportunity to get to know each other, right? So you'll discover in this process if this is a group that you even want to be part of. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that there may be lawyers that come out of the woodwork that want to take the cases and they want to take a chunk of money. Maybe that's not our people, right? So you do need I think a few months process, if that makes sense, to get to know John and myself and Brandon and the other people who've spoken, like Will and I don't know where Larry Brocky dropped off, but it's a mutual process, like to get to know each other. I just feel like that's important to say.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of people have never been through any civil action. I know I haven't, and I'm not an expert on it. I had to teach myself how to fight the government for criminal action. But yeah, I'm not an expert on civil action. And I think like even if ultimately they don't sign on to what you're doing, like by them joining the meeting, you know, you're talking through issues and they're becoming aware. We're kind of developing that collective awareness that we're going to need to take on the fight however we end up taking it on, right? And I think I'd like to reiterate too, like we need to view this as a long-term thing. Like it may take a year or 2 or 5 years to rebuild our lives, right? And I think eventually a lot of January 6th defendants are going to have a big impact on the world. I believe that. I think, you know, ultimately what they wanted to bring about for evil is going to turn out for good for a lot of people. But we are in a transition phase in life, and like don't rush to get to you know, the other stuff until you rebuild and get to a point where you find a little bit of stability, a little bit of calm. And I know there are a few people that are wanting to run for public office, and if you got the energy to do that right now, you know, go for it. But I do think, like with the issue of narrative, I think we're going to continue to win this as the years go forward, and people are going to view us in a much more positive light. And I think if you're thinking about public office, like you're probably going to be in a better position 5 or 10 years from now. So maybe be patient with that, or whatever other things that you're thinking about doing. But like I have no appetite to run for anything right now. I ran for city council back in the day, but I do have an appetite right now to rebuild my life and to kind of find a peace, because I've been fighting the government for 4 years. So yeah, hopefully by having this, we're raising awareness and we're all kind of getting on the same page of, you know, this is going to be a long-term thing for everybody. We're all kind of on a team together and we're trying to rebuild it. And when one of you wins, then I win. And then when I win, one of you wins. And the more wins that we stack up, we're going to help each other.
Absolutely. So well said. Colonel Brock, thank you for joining us today. We've been trying to get you on the last few weeks, and you've been a busy man. So we're glad that you're busy and support all the efforts that you've been engaging in. Please share kind of the update of what's been going on with you and where you see the situation.
Well, you know, like most of you, specifically, honestly, John, your case and mine are very similar. I was very relieved to be pardoned, but like you, I was pending resentencing. So I was pardoned on Monday, the 20th, and then on the 23rd, Judge Bates, my judge, signed a letter dropping all charges. So I don't know how I'm pardoned for something when all charges were eventually dropped, but I'll take both. Thank you very much. To piggyback a little on what Will said, I think a lot of that probably depends on what state you're in. I do intend to run for state representative in Texas. I haven't picked the exact district yet, but I will tell you that J6ers are very well thought of, especially those of us that were not violent. I think that's going to be a major differentiator in the mind of the American public if you do seek office. So I honestly respect what you said, and I have been working to rebuild our lives. And I say that by, you know, I've been working with the TSA and a couple of congressmen, specifically Congressman Brandon Gill, the new congressman from District 26 in Texas, has been instrumental and trying to get myself off of the Quiet Skies list as well as the terrorist watch list, assuming they're two different things. And I just received a letter yesterday stating that I was going to be removed from the terrorist watch list, and they were going to let me have my pilot's licenses back, or they were initiating the process with the FAA. As you all know, there's multiple agencies that we're going to have to deal with. I did post in the chat, but I don't see it there. Maybe it's just in our internal chat and not in the chat for everyone else. The email address of the TSA office, I emailed requesting them to get me off of that list.
I just put it in the chat.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, and
Thank you.
yeah, that's something that we should post from the We Are J6 socials account so that everyone can see them, right? Because yeah, anything that's helpful for the whole group, let us know so that we can post that publicly and get the word out on important issues like that.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I mean, I wasn't rude, but I wasn't as polite as I normally will be, because I did not honestly have any hope that they were going to do it. But I think if you state the case that, your sentence was vacated or you were pardoned, and that, they should remove you from this list as you've committed no terrorist acts whatsoever, I think you will get action from them. Now, the timeline, I will tell you, I think it took 3 weeks. So that's about a timeline you could expect for that. I am going to be in Washington, D.C. next week, and I'm going to meet with Congressman Gill's office. I'm trying to make this as broad as I can. Again, to echo, though, what John and Will and Dr. Gold said, we all individually need to be taking action to get our names off of these lists, as well as collectively looking for restorative justice. I think that is a great label to have on it.
Lieutenant? By the way, is it Lieutenant Commander or Lieutenant Colonel?
Lieutenant Colonel, but I'm retired. You can just call me Larry. I mean, again, I say that honestly because I did earn that title, and it took a while, much as you earned the title of doctor, but I'm retired. I'm just Larry to our group. It's the people that oppose us that I want to remind them of my service to this country.
Yeah, Colonel Brock.
Thank you, but I will stick with Colonel if it's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
You have earned it, and that's the way I feel.
Okay.
Can you tell this group if you know what the different organizations that have discriminated against us within the TSA? For example, in my case, I had TSA pre-check, but there's also Quiet Skies. Are you familiar with what things we should be looking to reverse?
Well, I believe, honestly, inside, and that's one of the questions I'm going to ask, inside TSA, there's a security directorate, and they manage, if you will, the list from just simply taking you off of pre-check if you were involved in a minor criminal incident, which they can do, or putting you on a terrorist watch list or Quiet Skies list. So I'm assuming there are multiple different lists and different entities. However, the TSA is responsible for all of those. Now, the FAA falls under the Secretary of Transportation, so that's a completely different list. Then you've got the FBI's list, which falls under the Department of Justice. So what I'm looking to do is try and get some kind of guideline, roadmap, or, because I'm a pilot, checklist, if you will, for all of us to uncheck all of these boxes to restore our rights as American citizens.
I hope you keep the group apprised, because I think this affects all of us.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I don't know if it has penetrated to the Quiet Skies list yet, because he did not specify that in the letter, but I will be traveling to DC tomorrow, so I will figure it out real quick. I'll be showing up at the airport 4 hours early as if I'm still on that list.
I would just speak as an ignorant layperson, because somebody questioned, I think people, many of us were on the Quad S. Maybe were all of us on the Quad S? Do you think if you were a J6 convict defendant?
I think most of us were, but I don't know that all of us were.
Okay, so just to answer the question for everybody, 100%, it was more than just Quad S, because after my sentence, after I served my sentence, I was surprised to find I was off the Quad S. I was surprised. It just happened. So they unchecked whatever box Lieutenant Colonel was talking about, but I'm still being blocked on TSA pre-check, which is presumably the lowest level that they have. So there's definitely layers. So I myself have to look into this. So if I find out more information, I'll share with the group. And if anybody else does, please do.
No, again, I picked my battles in importance. And one was to not become a terrorist. That way I could get my pilot's licenses back so I could start exercising my trade again.
Amazing.
And now, it's going to be getting my TSA pre-check and global entry back. So you're absolutely right. It's a matter of restoring that. And then my fear, honestly, is because I was flying international, my fear is that we've been put on an international terrorism list. So I've got to check that as well to make sure that I can travel to other countries.
So I will tell you, well, first of all, who runs the global nexus? Is that TSA? That's private. I will tell you that my private clearance came back faster than TSA, which I was really surprised.
Yes, ma'am.
And I went to Japan last year and I was not on any list. I was holding my breath.
Well, you're slightly different, though. And I only say that because I believe you pled solely to misdemeanors.
Correct.
If you become a felon, that they really kind of turn the screws on you. So, like John, I was convicted of the 1512C2, and that was eventually narrowed by the Supreme Court. And then, obviously, the DOJ agreed to vacate it. But in my case, they intended to retry me. Fortunately, President Trump won, and the rest is history. But again, that's just, it's a little bit different for me than it is for you. I don't know if anybody has been a convicted felon and been pardoned and subsequently traveled overseas. I am very curious to find out if you ran into any difficulty.
That is a good question that we can pose. I agree. John, you said you would be applying for your passport soon and you'll see what happens. We are encouraged that after 4 years, it's a joke, but after 4 years, the U.S. prosecutor contacted John and said, where should we return all these items that the FBI took from you 4 years ago? But
4 years later, they're like, oh, let us return your stolen property. Yeah,
what's interesting about that, though, is that they're at least like, there's some weird process checklist that they're going through that triggered that.
Yes, ma'am. But on that note, reference passports, I've asked for those back too, because probation, in my case, took them from me.
Right.
So when I talked to pretrial probation, the same people that took them, they said that they don't keep them, they send them to the State Department. So one of my objectives in DC this week is to figure out who to talk to at the State Department to get them back. My guess is they will have been rescinded and we will have to be reissued passports, but that's speculation on my part.
Colonel Brock, I think that's excellent information. When you determine more about that, please just let us know, because we'll post such items of interest for the group to the We Are J6 socials. On that note, also, I just want to mention to everyone that's watching, listening, participating, first of all, please continue to help grow this group and this effort. Share the live streams, share the social media content, and of course, tell everyone to register and join the group at wearej6.com. You can register as a former defendant if you are one, and that'll include you on substantive conversations about potential civil actions and etc. But anyone can and should register as an advocate at wearej6.com, because that just helps us to unite the entire country behind the overall effort of what needs to happen here. And anyone, if you have specific substantive stories that are important and relevant to the group and to the country, tag the We Are J6 accounts, particularly on X, in those posts so we can find them and help to amplify them. I think it would be great for, Dr. Gold, you have licenses that were affected by this J6 debacle. Colonel Brock, obviously you have licenses that were affected. I just want to take a moment to say congratulations and recognize how important and exciting it was that you've reclaimed those. That is no small thing, right? That's huge. And that's going to affect many people. Most people don't, when I say most people, I mean most of the general public, not understand the extent of the damage that J6ers have suffered in many, many different respects. Professional licenses is one of them. Go ahead, Dr. Gold.
I just want to say one of the advantages also of coming together is these questions about traveling. I personally would feel more confident if they were solved at a group level. If there was a lawyer negotiating with the administration, because there could be 10 different lists that we're on. We need to get removed. And I just don't feel so confident as a single individual that the government would ever be forced to do what's right. So that's another advantage to banding together. I had some interactions with the TSA over the past few years over these things. So I am going to do what Lieutenant Colonel said. We're going to follow up on that, and I'll keep everyone apprised. But I do think it's the kind of thing that has to be solved at kind of a higher level than the individual.
Well, it's honestly a little bit more than that too. I mean, I'm very curious as to, when we see the police body cam for Joseph Huddle, I believe was his name, but, I've spoken with various law enforcement officers, and when they pull us over, we could be flagged as domestic terrorists, which is going to obviously heighten the alarm that officer feels when he approaches us in a traffic stop. So it's very critical that we handle this in a timely manner, and I'm going to do what I can there. But I do urge all of you, remember that policeman is probably scared out of his mind because he believes he's approaching a domestic terrorist. So keep your hands at the top of the wheel and obey them completely so that we don't lose another J6er, please.
That was terrible. Thank you for saying that, Colonel. I just wanted to also go back to what John had said. I know that I was a unique situation, but we've all had interesting stories. And I was as committed, even though I took a plea, I was as deeply offended as all of you were at the lies. And in my case, because I was pretty high profile and I had 2 professional licenses to protect, it contributed to my taking a plea. I just didn't see a way back to retaining my licenses in the climate we were in.
No, ma'am,
So
I completely understand. And I
yeah.
do not judge anybody that took a plea because, had I had different family circumstances, maybe I would have done so as well. But no, I am not one of those guys.
No, for sure. I totally was. I didn't even. It wasn't even a thought in my
Yes,
head.
ma'am.
I'm
Yes,
saying
ma'am.
that it was definitely part of the pressure applied to me personally was that I had professional licenses, and they knew that it was applied to me personally because they threatened to charge me. And I'm sharing this with the group so that you understand where I'm coming from, because I haven't spoken so much about J6 matters in the last few years because my lane is medical freedom, but they threatened to charge me with assaulting a police officer. So I want people on this call to know that I am as committed to seeing this all the way through because the lies were so freaking extreme. I know many of you were threatened with the same thing or even charged with that. I know exactly how that feels. If they can say that a doctor and a lawyer and a mom who stood up to save lives of humans she didn't even know was out there trying to assault a cop, give me a break. I know the lies. What they came at, I just want to share this one thing, John, just the group might be interested.
Yeah.
I fought to retain my physician's license, not for my own sake, but really for the sake of the nation. It was the California state that came after me. And I'd already moved from California. The odds of my practicing medicine in California are 0, but I fought it, and I fought it for 3 years for this reason. So there is, I do think the law will be on our sides. Justice is slow, but it will get there. And I just wanted people to know that when you've got these facts, the pardon, the sweeping nature of the pardon, I think we're going to get there. And I hope we can all work together. Sorry if this is going on too long.
That's okay. Something that both Will and Colonel Brock mentioned that I think is really important, and it's really exciting. Will, you talked about how many J6ers can and will and should be positioned to be influential in their communities and in our nation, and specifically excellent potential candidates to run for public office. I think this is really important. And a note about that, I think it was Colonel Brock that mentioned that the differentiation in the public's mind between violent and nonviolent is going to be very important. It's going to have a lot of significance to it. Of course, that is sensible. But then, of course, at the same time, it's hugely problematic that, I don't know if I can say most, but many J6ers were assumed to be violent at a minimum and accused of violence and even charged with violent crimes. And in many, many, many cases, that was incorrect, it was inaccurate, invalid, it was dishonest. Sometimes it was completely fraudulent. For example, they threatened to charge Dr. Gold with assault. She never even touched a person, much less threatened anyone other than, giving a speech, which of course is not a threat or an assault. It's insane. But many people that were caught in scuffles may have physically touched someone without meaning to. And of course, that doesn't mean they're violent or committed violence. So there's, I think, a lot of work to be done, both sort of from a legal perspective, but certainly from a truth-telling perspective, to clarify the record for people that suffer from those defamations and from those false allegations, to clear their name and clear the public's view of who these people are. And so I think that's really important, something I hope that we, RJ6, can facilitate.
And John, if I could touch on that.
Please, yeah, please.
It is important for each of you to get all the video relevant to your activity that day.
Mhm.
Like, try to document your day, especially at the Capitol, down to the minute.
Kind of like the video that I did on my website as a reference. I don't know if you've seen that, but yeah, continue.
I think I did, yeah. But yeah, you want to like get every single perspective of where you were, what you did, and that way there can be no question, especially if they brought an allegation of assault and it was kind of shaky. Like there are instances where like a perspective from one angle might make it look bad, but if you have another angle on that, it can show that you weren't touching anybody.
The full context.
You know, one of the things I'm also going to try and do in DC is to get a tour inside the Capitol. I do not want to see it. I want to look for 3 specific cameras that I believe were hidden from me in my trial by the government. So that is my, Will, I'm very envious that you had the opportunity to go inside and look for those cameras, but there are a few that I want to look because they physically hid them, and I'm certain of it in my case. And so I want camera numbers so that I can go back and do exactly what you just said. I have most of it, but I do not have all of it, and I want all of it because it tells a much more compelling story.
Yeah, and do whatever you need to do. I think the other thing I'd point out, like everyone should write a book about their experience on that day and since then, because we need to document history. And when you do that, be as attentive to detail as possible. Don't just make stuff up. Like you actually need to be factual and credible, because there will be historians 100 years from now who are writing about January 6th and they want your perspective. And like you need to go into a lot of detail on what happened and what you were thinking and all of that. That might not come right away, but like begin to maybe document or make notes or whatever. I haven't begun writing yet, but I do intend to, because like I think we need to. Like we need to document it for history, and not everything was captured on video. And the other thing is, there are conspiracy theories about me. There are conspiracy theories about a lot of people. Maybe I've gotten things wrong about a few of you in the past just by looking at video, right? There are some things that play out on video that you're like, man, was there any coordination going on there? Was there any, weird shenanigans going on? And we know there were feds. We know there were police in the crowd. But there were also a lot of normal people, and like our interpretation of a thing right there may be completely off. And I found that out by talking to a lot of defendants after the fact that, what I thought about a certain scene, they actually had a perfectly legitimate explanation for what was going on there that I had just never thought of. And I'm pretty good about thinking about things from different angles, but like that is another reason to write a book, because especially if the government doesn't end up like digging into it like they should and declassifying everything, like we need to document our story so there aren't conspiracy theories 100 years from now about whether we were working for the government,
Yeah, and I just want to say, just so people don't get overwhelmed, sometimes we have so much on our plate. Writing a book is hard, but at the very least you owe this to yourself. All you have to do is start just writing down your story, your narrative, even if it's just for your family and your friends. Get it. No one's going to be as invested in your own reputation as you, and you will have peace, more peace in your own life if you do that. And my mind goes to all the possibilities if people put these things together, that we could then present them to the public. Like this is what the wearej6.com site is for, is to put out the stories.
Dr. Gold, there's a comment here from someone that said, I can't read it now, but government is claiming all J6 discovery cannot be provided to, quote, protect witnesses, unquote. So whatever degree that's happening, I think it's important for us to have pushback to demand that the government disclose all of this for transparency in the public record, per what Will just said, right?
Yeah, so I read that the commentator said that. I mean, I don't know if this is true, this is false. Like, we need lawyers to go in and make demands. Asking for stuff, you're not going to get anything. You have to make a motion, a demand. Like, you have to serve a demand on the government. I don't think this administration is interested in hiding the facts. So I don't know if that request was before Pam Bondi took over. You know what I mean? So for example, in my case, and John, I don't know if you disagree, we had the same case, the same facts. I think we had all the evidence. We didn't have evidence about J6 generally, but the evidence about like our time, like they misstated it, they misphrased how it was, but they did show us the video evidence of our time.
I
We
would,
didn't have the
I would
greater-
not trust that they showed us everything. Definitely not. And also,
They did not. Yeah, they did
I
not
feel
provide
very-
you everything.
of our
no,
time.
understood.
We
Understood.
had all the
I still don't trust that they did. They've not been trustworthy or ethical in anything. And there are so many examples where they have specifically violated the law, acted unethically, hidden materials. So why would I assume they haven't in a case where it's speculative and I don't know? I would assume otherwise. But
I think that
there's also, they have clearly violated the law, violated regulations, and withheld exculpatory evidence. In other words, Brady violations. Obviously, the famous example of Tucker Carlson showing Jacob Chansley's footage is a huge one, but there are other examples, and all of it cumulatively is exculpatory and has an effect on the situation. Because again, that we were not prosecuted as individuals, right?
I
We were
know.
all
I'm just saying the bigger picture of if there's a lot of stuff, Tuckers are the 40,000 hours that are missing. I get it. That's going to have to come from a demand on the government to a friendly administration,
which we now have. So.
We'll see.
Absolutely. And I think we all need to, even though time moves slowly for us, we just had Attorney General Bondi in place, I believe, for about 10 days. We're still waiting for Director Patel to assume command of the FBI. So again, I'm optimistic, like all of you, that we are going to get the truth out of this government. And I think I'm actually probably a little bit more optimistic than most. I think that the House representative that is going after the real story is at Loudermilk.
Yes, Loudermilk.
I intend to volunteer for that as well. And Dr. Gold, you hit the nail on the head. Write down what happened to you so that we can get those cases to him. So that Representative Loudermilk can actually see those what they did to us as people.
Colonel, I think it would be helpful. I never thought about going public. I don't seek the limelight, especially if it's outside the medical. But I think the nation would be astonished to hear that the United States government attempted to charge me with assaulting a police officer. I just think that would be a shocking thing for the nation to hear. Like I literally put everything on the line to save strangers. But they did, and there's no public record of it. But my attorney will attest to it because they squeezed me on the plea, saying if you don't sign the plea, we're going to charge you with assaulting a police officer.
Well, ma'am, I absolutely think you should go public with that. My position is that they have injected a poison into the American body politic, and our telling our stories is the truth that will help get that poison out of the American body politic. So I did actually show as much video as I had. I did put together a story with the help of a videographer on my website. And I did that because I wanted my story to actually be told. And I will tell you, I benefited from that in prison because there were a lot of guards that went to my website, looked at it and said, you do not belong in here. And I said, I know. So again, to each, everyone figure out their own circumstances and what they need to do. But we will benefit as a people if our stories get out.
And could I jump in a little bit on the discovery issue? Because
yes, Will. You've got a lot of experience there. Thank you.
Yeah. So what the government tried to do is they tried to have every defendant sign a protective order, which limited your access to discovery. And if you had an attorney, a lot of them didn't want to deal with even showing you that or giving it to you. But you had a right to possess anything that was not sensitive or that came directly from you, or anything designated sensitive you could possess. But if they designated it highly sensitive, only your attorney could hang on to that, right? But a lot of attorneys didn't even want to deal with that. But anything that was actually used in your trial as evidence is now public under the protective order, and your attorney should have no issue giving you that material. Now, as far as the discovery goes, what the government would do is they would give you like a folder of case-specific discovery, which would be the files that they wanted you to use in your case to convict you. And they didn't give you everything related to you. They wanted to give you the clips that they wanted to weave a narrative about you. And oftentimes they would withhold exculpatory information from that, right? Now, they also had like a global discovery that had 8 million files in it by the end of it all, like 8 million some. I don't even know the final number, but over 8 million.
Yeah.
And what they would tell you is like, yeah, we provided you everything in discovery. You just have to go look for it in that big haystack over there. And that global discovery had all the CCTV, had all the tips that were sent in, a lot of other documents and whatnot. But it was a lot of work and very difficult to even access it. And their program would always crash or kick out your identity or whatever. And so, yeah, technically they claim they gave you all the Brady materials, but they made it as difficult to get to as possible. And they didn't show you where it was, which I think was a violation. But they also didn't put everything in that 8 million. There's a lot of things that they kept out of that. And what I found throughout my case is when I'd hound them on motions like, hey, you haven't produced this or you haven't produced that. And then what do you know? There'd be a global production letter a month or two later, and we'd get more items on that one thing. So there are a lot of materials that the government has that we have never actually seen that I think would be relevant. And again, the only way we're going to get that, and we're going to get the government to produce that in the Trump administration, is to continue to highlight it, right? If we all shut up and just go and be quiet, then we'll probably not get anything we want, right? A lot of things that should be changed won't be changed. So we have to continue to highlight things the government needs to change, like any watch list we're on, and go after that until the problem is fixed. But anyway, hopefully that's a helpful overview of the discovery.
John, if I can just take 30 seconds. Well, that was amazing. I just want to clarify or expand a little bit on what I said. So I was a J6 defendant, but also as a lawyer, I was able to work on John Strand's case. So I did run into exactly what Will is talking about and exactly what some people have posted, which is the government. So in my case, when I took a plea, the government didn't give me any evidence, basically. Like they said, like, here, sign this, or we're going to charge you with assaulting a cop, essentially. So I couldn't even see what they had or didn't have. But then when John went to trial, two things that are important. One is he had a lawyer who was actually really trying to find evidence and work for him. And I know some of you didn't have that. I know some of you had lawyers who just accepted that, they're not even going to try that hard on behalf of their client. So some of the reasons some of you didn't get evidence is literally your lawyers didn't work really hard. That's a fact. And that's not on the government, that's on the lawyers. Okay. But many of you had, somebody just posted that they gave you evidence the day before. A little bit like that, John, that happened in your case. They released some evidence late. But I did, as a lawyer in your case, John, I did see all of the video and all of the text and all of the, is there something that they didn't reveal? I don't know. There was a lot. I went through a lot. I just wanted you to know. They said though that I couldn't, that it was privileged. You weren't allowed to say it with the public. I was only getting access as a lawyer. But a few months later, they did publicize and make public all of that. That's not all of it. I'm saying some defendants did get evidence, did go public, but that's also why we have to proceed as a group, because all of the evidence needs to be out there for the public, for everyone, because it's a group story. It's a national story. It's not just your story anymore.
And if I could tag on to that, Dr. Gold, like, you only know what evidence you're aware of, right? But there's a lot out there that you're not aware of.
Right.
And if you look at any CCTV of your case, there's probably 15, 20 people at any given time with cameras or phones out there filming. And where is that video or photograph? Maybe it got deleted. Maybe, who knows, it's out there somewhere. But there's a lot that they probably had that they never gave you. And what I was finding is that when videos were released from another defendant's trial or pleading or whatever, I'd be like, oh, that video is actually relevant to my case, but the government never produced it to me, Or I'd find video out in public, and, there are collections of, you can go on archive.org. They've got like 50,000 videos related to January 6th you can pour through. That takes a lot of work. But I found videos that were public that were relevant to me or other defendants. And if I saw something that would help another defendant, I'd shoot it to them. But yeah, you didn't know what you didn't know. And there was a lot that we didn't get.
John and Dr. Gold and Will, I apologize, but I do have a previous commitment, so I do have to go now. But please have me back on anytime.
Of course.
I will of course, keep you guys appraised of how things go in Washington, D.C. And
Yes.
if you think of anything in particular you would like me to ask Congressman Gill's staff, please send it to me.
That sounds great. We will do that. Thank you so much, Colonel Brock, for joining us. And we will see you soon. Yes, absolutely. Bless you.
You bet. See you, Will. Bye, Dr. Gold.
And we are at 1 o'clock. So Will and Dr. Gold, if you have any other closing thoughts, let me know.
I appreciate you having me on, John, and good to chat
Will.
with you all. And I just encourage everybody to keep going. We've been through hell for 4 years, and now we're at a relatively pretty good place, but we're not quite there. We've got loose ends we need to tie up, and I think the most important ones are probably loose ends that we have with the government, like watch list and restitution issues, things like that. But we also need to look at any news outlets that continue to defame us, or former employers or banks that debanked you. I think we need to tackle Facebook and Instagram. Like, that one is a big one on my mind. But anyway, I think we're going to get there, and every day we take another step, and it took one day at a time to get through 4 years. And
yeah,
we're going to get through whatever we're getting through right now, and we're in a much better position to do it.
You're right about that. It's encouraging. We're at a very exciting turning point kind of place. And in some ways, there's some loose ends to close up on the last chapter, but this new chapter, there's a lot going on. I mean, what I've noticed, just generally speaking, in the public space, is the Democrat Party / leftist side of the political spectrum, which was a huge part of building up this narrative and creating the monstrosity that J6 has become. They are fully invested in that narrative and story. They're not letting it go. So you'll see them continue to reference those violent rioters and other rhetoric to castigate and demonize essentially Trump supporters, MAGA Americans, however else you want to identify with what I would say the constitutional libertarian side of the equation, or however you phrase it. But that ongoing battle is fierce. It's not over. It's really, we're in the thick of it. So restorative justice, certainly relates to, we say we're pursuing restorative justice through victim recovery and government accountability. So victim recovery is first and foremost. That's incredibly important. 1,600 people and their families, so many thousands that have been very, very deeply hurt, ruined by this in many ways that extend out into the future. And we want to work on resolving those things as best as we can, but then also government accountability and really just restoring equal justice for all as a fundamental value and as a viable concept in our nation. The enemies of that are still fighting very fiercely, and J6ers really are still the tip of the spear in many ways, I think. So, the work that we have is large, it's important, and just want to encourage everyone to stay encouraged, to stay positive, optimistic, hopeful, but stay committed and stay diligent. Dr. Gold, do you have any closing comments before we wrap for this week?
No, just expect that you'll be getting the query this week. Look at it. If there are any harms that you think we've left out, we've tried really hard to include. We hear you. We've all been there too. The social harms, the travel harms, those are like kind of the biggest ones. Thanks.
And also just encourage everyone to continue participating with the content on wearej6.com and wearej6, the social media accounts, particularly on X. Like I said, if you're posting specific aspects of a story that you have related to persecution and fallout, related to the government lying or acting improperly, and some of the things that Will mentioned, issues with government agencies like TSA and many others, all of these things, they need to come to light. It is incumbent on each one of us as individuals to be working that side, collecting the stories and telling them, but we want to help facilitate and amplify that. So you can tag We Are J6 on those things, and we'll look to help you share those stories. And like Dr. Gold said, we will get emails out to the group specifically with a link for that documentation of the table of harms, which will be helpful both in terms of the educating the public and also preparing potential civil action with the Trump administration and the DOJ. We've also previously sent emails requesting you to submit video materials on persecution testimonials so that we can kind of craft some of those in a fashion that help them, again, to accelerate and really amplify the story to a larger degree. We've seen a few submissions, but we want to see a lot more. We'll send out more emails to encourage you, but please just continue to look for those. And of course, urge everyone that you can to continue expanding the group. Register at wearej6.com. And that is all we have, I believe, for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, as always, we'll see you again next Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll see you at wearej6.com. All right. Thank you guys so much. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And the battle continues.
Hey, have a great weekend, everyone.
Blessings.